Wow, that's bright. Namaste. Salam alaikum. And shukran, no, not shukran. Ni hao. Hi. Amit asked me why I was thinking why I'd traveled over from London to speak to you. And the thought was, well, 200 CIOs from one of the fastest growing countries in the world, one of the BRICS, and doing it in the casino of another was just an opportunity not to be missed. So CIOs of India, fellow CIOs, I salute you. It's a privilege to talk to you about big data. And the other thing about India is what you've done in the last 20 years since you opened up the country is nothing short of amazing. You've lifted hundreds of millions of people out of poverty, and you continue to do so. I spent a year out in the Gulf with a conglomerate and a lot of work in India, and I can assure you that without Indian IT, the Gulf would fall apart. So the energy that hits you as you step off the plane at Bangalore is infectious, and that's not the only thing that hits you as you step off the plane at Bangalore. I've had a long association. I think Ratnesh Kapoor from Make My Trip reminded me that we'd started with ruggedized laptops in British Gas, actually developing those in India with emphasis. And the other thing is, in India, I know you get paranoid about China, but you don't have their demographic time bomb and their aging population and their property bubble. But you've got challenges too. I can assure you I've never been as scared as on my trip from Delhi to Haridwar. I'm told the British left 3 good things when we left. First was the railway, but I'm not sure about that. Second was the legal system, but it left big queues. And the third was English, and I think that gives you a competitive advantage. So what a fantastic opportunity awaits you in the big world. London 2012, it's been a really interesting year. It started off with riots, actually, and the rioters actually beating the police because they had BlackBerry Messenger. The second big event was the big wedding. The third was the Queen's Diamond Jubilee. So it's been a busy year. And then we had the Olympics, London 2012, and the Paralympics. So a very eventful year, and lots of big data. One of the more interesting uses of big data was the Twitter mood meter on the London Eye. The pink, by the way, means it's good, and the blue means we're not so happy with it. How did they do it? Well, they collected all the tweets, extracted the positive and negative, and formed a percentage pie chart which they projected onto the London Eye. So quite an interesting use of the emoticons and all the tweets, the 40,000 that were coming across during the Olympics. A little bit of background by myself. Thanks, Baxter, you did quite a comprehensive review there. Just done a couple of years as the interim CIO for the city. Done a few in oil and gas, and a lot with British in front of them, like British Gas and British Aerospace, and also BP. And I also advise the government on programs and procurement. So this appeared. Anyone know what CIO stands for? Career is over? When I told that one to 200 CIOs in China last year, they all fell about laughing. But this was a report which came out from Cranfield and Deloitte a couple of years ago. And what it's saying is actually our role isn't terribly well defined, is it? And no one really understands what we do. Misunderstood, underappreciated. We're not dinosaurs yet. And what are we facing today? Well, I think you've heard quite a lot of this already, a lot about mobile, bring your own device, consumerization. Incidentally, the apple in front of the civil servant is because we've given Apple tablets to all our civil servants, well, the senior ones anyway, and our MPs. But today I'm going to talk to you really about big data. This is my big data. Anyone know what that is? No guesses? Huh? It's actually, well, that's my PhD thesis on one page. It's actually a seismic section, and this was big data in 1970, what. And it was a seismic section showing the first MOHO reflection, MOHO discontinuity, the boundary between the crust and the mantle. Cambridge didn't have a computer big enough to be able to do this work, so I had to go to Paris, which was a hardship, the food's so bad, and use their CDC 7600 supercomputer. So that was my first exposure to big data. So what is big data? There's a lot of it about. 2.5 quintillion bytes. Anyone know what that is? A quintillion? No guesses? 10 to the 18. But the big figure is 90% of the data has been created in the last 2 years. Fantastic. And it's coming, as we say, from everywhere. And the thing I think that's really driving the numbers up is the multimedia. It's the video, as we saw. It's the sound and all the rest of it. And obviously mobile. It's multimedia on the move. Big data, well, it's not that new, actually. It's been around. These tablets, you can find thousands of them with cuneiform from Sumeria. I like this one. Anyone here ever use punch cards? Oh, there's a few oldies in the audience, right. And actually, these guys in 1800 are using punch cards to weave cloth. Fantastic. So, as Peter said yesterday, technology is enabling the global economy. And we have got that torrential flow of information, and a heck of a lot of them in the last 2 years. Some of these numbers, they're numbers, but I think the big ones, like 40% of projected global data growth per annum, and that compares with 5% in global IT spending. And some of these numbers, you've got to compare them against what we've got, for instance, in libraries like the Library of Congress, 235 terabytes. And even in our own companies, we're collecting such a fantastic amount of information. 15 out of 17 have more data stored than the Library of Congress. So, what is big data? What's big data in your view? Any ideas? Is it just that it's too large and complex for conventional processing? Well, Gartner's come up with 3 V's, and we've now come up with 6. Yeah, sure, it's around volume, but it's also around velocity. We found recently that we've had to respond to people within 20 seconds on Twitter. It's around both structured and unstructured, so there's variety and there's volatility. It's new stuff coming on all the time, and it's also about the veracity. But the main thing, as far as we understand as CIOs, in my view, it's around value and what's the opportunity in there. So these are numbers which were coming up from a McKinsey report which had been published last year. We're talking about big numbers, big potential numbers. And some of this are real benefits in terms of the sort of value which we can create from big data. But there's some caveats. Those figures of 140 to 190,000, that's just US figures. It's not talking about you guys or China. And they're going to need a lot more data-savvy managers. So the McKinsey report, it looked at 5 sectors. Public sector was one of those. So for the European Union alone, 250 billion euros, so roughly $250 billion. And that sort of productivity growth each year. The other sector, US healthcare, is not the most efficient in the world, but they were talking about the potential for another 300 billion increase in value per year, and that sort of percentage productivity growth. Manufacturing, and this quite amazed me actually, we're talking about potential for 50% decrease in product development costs, and up to 7% reduce working capital. And in retail, and actually we've got a rather good example in the UK for retail for the use of very granular use of customer information, where Tesco has actually really pulled ahead in terms of the retail supermarkets side through the use of big data and very aggressive use of that big data. And the other thing, of course, is they can find out where you are. It's Big Brother. But there's a lot of money in there and also value to end users. But the big thing, and this is what the McKinsey report was coming up with, is that we need a lot more people who can actually analyze and produce meaningful information out of all this data. A lot of it coming through things like social media. This is saying that, in fact, penetration of smartphones has nearly doubled since 2008, and that's increasingly use of social media on them. So how do we benefit? We've got to look at multiple data sources. That creates problems because we've got standards to deal with, standards in terms of information, if you want to get intelligence out of this. We've got to build models, and models which are easy to use for the end users. So that means, to a certain extent, we're going to have to build up that capability in our organizations and build simple tools for our business users to be able to use. So what's our role? I think it's really in the title, because we are the Chief Information, and I think the key word is information officer. So what's our role? The CFO, what does he do or she do? CFO has the role for governance, the custodian of financial information in the organization for finances. By the same token, I think we provide leadership in information, the information asset. So it's all around governance and strategy of information, but we've got to remember that we've got to deliver those results, to deliver value for money, and act as an informed purchaser of IT services, essentially. And we've got to be close to the business. The business gives us the strategy, the direction, but we've got to show what the capabilities are to be able to innovate in the business and to be able to change. So CIO is no longer career is over, it's change and innovation originator. So data. Data on its own really is not much use. Data, we've got to add value to, essentially. So in purpose and context, what is data becomes information. And information in the minds of people is around knowledge, moving towards a knowledge-sharing organization. And over time, and with experience, that becomes wisdom. So we have an important role. In the past, we've tended to concentrate on our comfort area, our comfort zone, around the technology and the systems. But what's the technology? What's the IT and the IS there to actually deliver? What's it there to do? It's around management of information, isn't it? Streamlining of business processes. And in the long run, trying to create the knowledge-sharing organization. So in the past, we've had a lot of concentration on the technology, on the systems, and we've had gaps. Let's face it, a lot of CIOs, we've had issues with the business. The technology is important, but it's important as the foundation for creating systems to manage the information to enable the knowledge-sharing organization. Now, I think this was Drucker that said that, but I haven't yet been able to find it in his writings. But big data, in the end, all that we have, in fact, to measure is information. So the CIO's mission is around management and communication of information, so facilitating that in the organization, streamlining of business processes. And anyone know what KISS stands for? Keep it simple, Did someone say stupid? Well, I got a different one. It's KISS. It's around these are the sort of principles which, as a CIO, I found very useful. It's around standardization, streamlining, sharing. Around security, you've heard a lot about that. But actually, I just chaired an information security conference in London. And the main issues which are coming across was actually information is to do with people. It's awareness, it's around training, and it's around education. Because as you move into the mobile world, beyond the castle walls or the firewalls, into the bigger world, you've got big issues, and it's around, the weakest point is normally the people. And it's around integration. So where do we need to do? Yeah, information is the competitive weapon. It's around giving us that customer intimacy and streamlining decisions and around minimizing costs. And we've got to focus on what are the business strategic imperatives. Those customer relationships and exploiting and sharing knowledge. And at the end of the day, it's boring, but we've actually got to sweat the assets. Yep. So what are our aims? It's around bridging that gap. It's around customer focus, reducing costs, spreading best practice, and standardizing and integrating where necessary. So how the heck do we do this? Well, we try and bridge that gap. I found I do interim roles, so when you go into an interim role, what you need to get very early on is that credibility. Quick wins do help. And it's finding who are the people to ally with. And it's around the governance, the steering boards and working groups, and developing what we call hybrids, people who are both business and IT savvy. Some people call them mongrels. So as CIOs, what are the desirable characteristics? It's that credibility, it's the gravitas, it's around understanding the business, it's around being an intelligent customer for those IT services, and I'm sure you all know this, it's around stress handling capability. It's around people, it's around people management. Each job I go into, I find that the main issues are really around people and people management, and both up and down the organization. And it's about can-do, being able to do it. Adaptability, GSOH, do you know what that stands for? It's used in dating agencies. Good sense of humor. Great sense of humor, sorry. You've got to have it. So what's the CIO role? It's really around leadership. It's around business solutions, and it's around business knowledge. As I said, it's around information. It's around governance, so getting the right governance in place. In the last role I had with the city, what we actually did was to set up an information management governance board chaired by one of the real movers and shakers on the business side. It's not an easy thing to do, but it actually has started to move forward. And we've realized, for instance, that one of the major issues that you have with information governance is actually the standardization, because the city was a whole lot of different businesses, 24 different businesses, so rather like a mini conglomerate. And one of the issues you had was that each one defined things differently. So when does the week start? Does it start on a Sunday or a Monday? And if you're in the Middle East, it might be on a Thursday or a Friday. So these are the sorts of trivial things which you've got to deal with, but can actually make quite a difference in the organization. So it's about moving up what I call that value chain. So it's moving up from the IT through creating the systems actually into what our title says, which is it's around information asset. We are the custodians of that information asset. That's where we become chief information officers. But we mustn't forget that it is also really around delivering results. It's around delivering that value for money. So we've got to focus on the costs and be an informed purchaser. Yeah, we mustn't forget the IT. We're the people with the knowledge about the IT within the organization. And we, therefore, have to be able to purchase that either through cloud or through outsourcing or offshoring. And, of course, India has been a strong source of offshoring in the past. So, CIO, or is it DIM, Director of Information Management? It's an unfortunate abbreviation. So it's around understanding the business and being the business. It's around being that hybrid. It's around exploiting the IT, but it's also around bridging that gap between business and IT. And that is communication. That's dealing with people all the time. And I'm sure I'm talking about my grandmother sucking eggs here. So there's a few rope tricks. I don't know if you've ever tried to push a rope, but it's quite difficult. So try to engender that pull in the business. Remember, it is easy to tie yourself in knots. It is a difficult balancing act. I've always found that in the CIO roles. And you've got to avoid that lynching party at the end of the day. So, will CIOs disappear in 10 years? What do you think? No? Well, what do we got to do? Innovate. Yeah, I think that's right. It's around innovation, but it's also taking the opportunities as they come, isn't it? So you've got to be opportunistic. And to be opportunistic, you've got to understand what the business is. So it's taking those strategic opportunities, what I call strategic opportunism. Yeah? So when IT is standard, but it's not around the IT. The IT actually is the commodity, isn't it? That's the commodity which we use. It can sometimes be a frustrating commodity, especially when it doesn't connect together and work. But at the end of the day, that's the commodity, that's the thing which we've got to buy as a service. And it's around really probably what's one of the most important assets in the organization. It's around the information asset. And I used to think that the term CIO, it's originally an American term, Chief Information Officer. I used to think it was perhaps a bit pedantic. But at the end of the day, that is really what we're about. It's around managing the information asset. And we are the change, and as you said, innovation originators. So in the end, what I think we've all got to manage and remember that we're managing, it's information. So from London, 2012, it's been an exciting year. The Olympics has been exciting. And I think the other thing which was impressive was the way that the Paralympics came to the fore. I don't know if you had as good a coverage of the Paralympics in India as we had in London, but I think it was the best we've yet seen of the Paralympics. And I certainly was astonished to see what some of these people could do and the amount of emotion that could be engendered and just the fantastic courage of these people. That was really brought to the fore. So the sort of information and broadcasting, but also the 26 digital channels which the BBC were producing was a torrent of data. But I think at the end of the day, it actually produced a quite good result. And of course, we had one of the presidential candidates, Mr. Mitt Romney, who is just lost, by the way, come to us in London and told us he thought we were not up to the mark in terms of producing the Olympics. That was before. So I think London, at the end of the day, has actually proved him wrong. So from London, many thanks, and I look forward to many more conversations with you.